So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey everybody, welcome to this. It's not an episode of anything. It's just a thing we're doing. It's not even on a normal stream day, because I don't normally have shows on Wednesdays, right? This is a Wednesday. I think it's a Wednesday.
Ostensibly.
Sure. We'll call it Wednesday. If you are someone who is in fact celebrating old calendar Christmas, then Merry Christmas. If you're not, then Happy Wednesday. Michael and Dr. Tapiocaweasel, are either of you people who celebrate Christmas on the old calendar?
No.
Okay, then. Happy Wednesday. Okay. Look, there's people out there who are celebrating Christmas right now. It's a thing.
No, Dapper, I love you. You're a professional nerd, and it's delightful.
Thank you.
It probably has its advantages. Everything is deeply discounted right now, and you could get everything, gifts, food, everything much cheaper now. I kind of want to do that.
I was talking to a Greek person once, and they were like, you know what the best part about celebrating Easter most years, a week or two after everyone else, is all the Easter candy goes on clearance before Easter.
Yep.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about the weirdness of different calendars for Christian holidays. We're here actually to talk about the flat Earth because, Michael, it is my understanding that it is your belief that the Earth is, on a large scale, topologically flat rather than having positive curvature over large scales, which is the thing that evidence points to, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, thank you for wording it like that, because I think flat is just way too stark, because there's mountains, there's waves, there's hills, valleys. But yeah, I also think the stationary part is important too, but level and stationary, generally speaking. And again, I don't care if it's triangle, I don't care if it's flat, I don't care if it's oblate spheroid. I just think the evidence right now is, and again, I haven't always been this way. I was a big Star Trek fan, TNG specifically. I've read almost every sci-fi space book you could think of.
I don't know, I can think of a lot.
No.
Maybe that I can think of, not as many as Dapper can think of.
We might have a few in common there, but yes, to wrap that up, I think the evidence right now is very damning, and I have a lot of questions. And again, I'm a human. I could be wrong. I'm totally open to being, having my viewpoint changed here. But right now, I'm I can't believe that all of this, according to the heliocentric model, everything's almost like an illusion meant to make it seem like it's not the center of the universe, and it is stationary and it is level. You really have to do some deep dives into things that I am definitely not an expert on. And again, I'm not saying I am the best cartographer, astronomer, or you name it. I'm not a physicist. I'm not. I am just looking at what's observable, repeatable, and again, you may find me on the lesser trustworthy side of some of the images we get from outer space. But yeah, I think that sums up my position pretty well. Thank you.
Well, so I guess then, since you said you had, you think that the evidence is pretty damning, but you also had some questions. Let's start with the first part. And be warned, Tapioca here and I may have some pushback for this, but
my body is ready. Yeah.
So what would you say is your the most compelling bit of evidence that you have seen that indicates to you that either the predictions of let's stick with the flat versus round thing, right? Because we could have a stationary geocentric Earth. That's another thing that there are people who believe.
Yeah.
So let's just stick with the topology, right? What is the thing that to you most strongly indicates that on the largest scales, the topology of Earth has no large-scale curvature, as opposed to the globe, which would say that over large scales, there is positive curvature, right? Because Earth is a sphere that it's approximately a sphere. Don't come at me with Dapper, it's a little bit flat or squished around the pole. Yeah, I get it. We're going to go with a sphere for today because it's approximately true for most purposes. Anyway, so what is that one piece of most compelling, or at least your favorite bit? And also, Silent Tetrapod just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you very much, Silent Tetrapod.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to narrow down a favorite one, but I would say that the top one is just the nature of water itself, and how it will, quote unquote, always find its level. It always needs a container of some sorts. And when I go out and look at some of these videos that are, first off, that just can't happen on a sphere, especially one that's spinning, going in multiple directions at one time. That is a top one that we can start with. Just the nature of water. How can the water stick to a ball that's spinning? And again, if we're 70% water, how can that curve? And again, I know we're going to dive into the gravity.
That's the one-word answer to that question.
Yeah, I know we're going to go into. I'd love to dive into that more. And then also, what about these laser tests on lakes that freeze? And again, probably some optics in there too.
That's a second topic. So let's just start with the first one. What about? So first, the thing is, the word level does not mean flat. It means of equal distance from essentially the center of the Earth, or if you have a flat Earth, from the mean sea level, which is a little bit tricky because I don't know if you know this, but sea level is not the same everywhere on the Earth. For instance, on either side of India, the level of the ocean is actually different by like several meters. It's measurably higher on one side versus the other. And that's because water does not simply magically find some kind of level. What it actually does is it conforms to local forces. So, for instance, if you want to talk about liquid water that does not currently have a container doing things in regards to local forces, we can take a look at things like rain clouds. When rain forms, it starts with droplets that nucleate around some little particle in the air. It's usually a tiny little piece of dust or something like that, right? But then, as they grow, things like updrafts push this liquid water, which forms a spherical shape because of water tension, up into the air, which gathers more water, and it bounces around until finally it's so big that the updrafts are no longer strong enough to keep it suspended in the air, and then it falls. So the very fact that rain falls on its own, all by itself, means 1, water curves because raindrops are roughly spheres. 2, water does not always need a physical container like a cup or a bathtub or a pool. And 3, that water conforms to the forces that act on it locally. Because all water is a collection of little water molecules with some stuff dissolved, and, there's some hydroxyl ions and all that stuff, sure, whatever. At, a nice level of approximation, it's a bunch of water molecules that act in accordance to forces. So if gravity is a force that exists, then there is no contradiction between gravity causing water to stick to the outside of a large mass and conform to the approximate shape of that mass by finding a level which will conform to that large-scale curvature, right? If Earth does have large-scale positive curvature, then level also has large-scale positive curvature, and water finding its own level will mean that over large scales, that water is curved, which is something that we can observe in cases where there is a long stretch of water to the horizon, and there are things that go over it. So, not only is this physically consistent with the laws of physics, not only is water acting according to the laws of physics and moving around in ways that are not simply finding its own level in a container, easily observable just because if you've ever been somewhere where it rains, which I assume you have been, because I'm guessing you don't live in the Atacama Desert or Antarctica. I don't know for certain, but I'm guessing. And on top of that, the observed instances of water measurably curving out in the real world. I mean, I was in the Navy. I saw things go over the horizon.
He may need a chance to respond.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I like learning. Like I said, I am no scientist. I am just someone that wants to think logically and consistently. And again, I'm really big on observable, repeatable, the good old scientific method. But
I mean, I feel like rain is that.
What about surface tension? And again, can we really compare rain droplets less than a milliliter, or even less than that, to the ocean?
I mean, yeah, it's a matter of scale, right? The ocean is a lot of water. A rain droplet is a little bit of water, but the physical properties of water, in that it reacts to forces, doesn't change just because there's a bunch of it or a little bit of it. It just means that the more of it there is, the more large-scale forces are going to predominate over it. So yeah, it's true. The wind is probably not going to lift up the entire ocean. That's because there's a large bulk of it. But the point of the raindrop example is not to say that the oceans don't react to forces, or that they're special, or that they're going to get lifted up into the air. It's just to point out that water is just regular old matter, and it reacts to forces. And if there is a force pushing it towards the center of a large body of mass, that will of necessity mean that it curves around that body of mass if that body is roughly spherical. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Tapiocaweasel. I know you were trying to say something.
I was going to say, I think that the water droplet, it does an okay job of, saying, you can have sort of attracting, for one, or self-containing in some sense, bodies of water. But I do think that it's clear that the difference is, I think, gravity-based. The idea that there's something that can keep a large body of water, a volume of water where the surface area, like related to its volume, makes it so that the surface tension and everything is negligible. And I think the conversation really is fundamentally about whether gravity exists or not.
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. So,
I think that's one. I just wanted to. Can you explain further? I think you said something, Dapper, that the scale of water, it doesn't matter. If I would push back a little bit, like if you look at dew droplets on a leaf in the morning, that is, it can be spherical, it can be curved. But that, again, we're talking about very small amounts, and wouldn't that be surface tension?
Yeah,
because we know that there is a measurable amount of surface tension,
yeah.
And when if you put a hose on that flower in the morning, it's not going to stick like a dew droplet. So I think the behavior does have something to change. But again, I would switch probably into the gravity conversation too. I think it goes right with that.
So I'm not going to say that the shape of the water in the ocean at large scales is primarily due to surface tension.
It's almost not at all. Almost not at all.
There are tiny forces there, and as a result of the large amount of water. But the thing is that the amount of force given by the surface tension per, say, unit area is actually not different on the ocean. It's just that per unit volume, there's so much more water there that relative to the volume, it's not the dominant force. But my point is simply that water isn't magic. It just follows the forces that act upon it. One of those happens to be surface tension, and in some cases that can be the predominant force, in other cases it won't be. But the fact is that if there's a force pushing it towards the center of mass that we're going to call gravity, if gravity exists at all, then there is not a contradiction between water curving positively at large scales and water finding its own level, because if that's the case, then level just is curved. In fact, level in surveying manuals is always defined as following the curve of the Earth. It is not the same thing as the horizontal plane in surveying, because surveyors do account for the curvature of the Earth. So saying that water always finds its level is just saying that if the Earth is flat, then water is flat, and if it's not flat, then water is curved, which doesn't help differentiate. Water's level at large scales. I agree, but that doesn't mean it's flat. So, I guess then
how many level surfaces make up a sphere that we see from, that would be...
Well, I mean, there are no truly level surfaces that cover the entire Earth, so I guess none. But if you had a perfect sphere, if Earth were actually a mathematically perfect sphere, which it's absolutely not, although it's very close compared to, just even a billiard ball. But if Earth were a perfect if Earth were a perfect mathematical sphere, right? If it were actually just a surface that's all equidistant from a single point in the middle, then there would be one level surface. of the Earth. It would just be a level surface. And if you were to walk on it, at local levels, because the positive curvature would be so small, because the sphere is so big, you could approximate it as flat at distances up to, a few kilometers. And then after that, your flat approximations will become increasingly inaccurate.
Gotcha. So we're now at gravity makes it stick, and I guess my next question is, gravity has some questions that make me go,
Okay.
For example, you said it, a rain cloud, it's just water up there. Rain clouds weigh 22 tons. Some of them, there was a huge storm today in the U.S. That cloud was thousands of miles long. That weighs a lot. How is that rain cloud that's 22 tons, maybe even more, how is that in the air when it's just water and you're saying water is water and it's going to react? Why is that up in the air? And you said it's just water droplets. That's one of them. Secondly, again,
let's answer
no
that
scientists
question.
Here. Yeah, please go ahead.
Do you want to take this one, Dr. Tapiocaweasel, as a physicist, or should I?
My general answer would be, if you actually solve for the forces, if you can imagine the thing as a single object, like a rigid object, which you can't really, it's a cloud, but if you did, the upward forces are balancing the downward forces. It's just that the downward force is obvious and we see it every day, and it's gravity, whereas the upward force...
Hold on, Michael just disconnected.
Oh no. Terrible.
Michael, you back?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's all right. It happens.
The short answer is that the forces do in fact balance. The forces of the air are pushing it up.
And he's gone again.
Interesting.
Jeez.
Kicking, it's like I'm not touching anything, it's just kicking me off.
You might have a loose connection somewhere. I don't know. From my end, what I see is you disappear from the stream and then it says user has no connected devices. So it's telling me that your webcam and or mic are just disconnecting. So I don't know.
Yeah, I just enabled them again. So I didn't.
That's weird.
Sorry.
Okay.
Balance, but the short answer is balance the forces. The slightly more complicated answer is that there are updrafts and things. And also a cloud is not, I don't know if it's necessarily less buoyant than the air around it.
I mean, it's going to depend, right? So if a single water molecule is less dense than, say, a single diatomic oxygen molecule, right? So there are plenty of particles in the atmosphere that if they bump into a lone particle of water vapor, will have plenty of energy to push it up and overcome gravity temporarily. Now, on the whole, gravity is always going to be acting on the clouds. So there's always a downward trend, which is why things like, rain do in fact happen. But you can actually see this in all sorts of things, right? So have you ever poured some, like you ever make a sauce and you add a little bit of cornstarch to the sauce to start thickening it up?
Yeah.
When you first pour that in, the cornstarch kind of stays towards the top. Now, if you were to let it go and just watch it, it would eventually settle down. What's actually happening is that because there's molecules in whatever sauce you're making that are bouncing around because it's hot normally, unless you're making cold sauces, which I guess you could do. That's weird. You're not going to get it thicken up well this way. But anyway, I'm assuming you're making a hot sauce and add a little cornstarch. Because all those molecules are bouncing around and the particles of the cornstarch are so small, they can impart enough momentum when they push up on the particles that it takes a long time for them to fall. That's all that's happening, is because the cloud is so dispersed and because the particles of water are so small that some of them are just independent little molecules and some of them are collections of molecules that are only a few dozen big. If you have things like updrafts or even just random Brownian motion from the particles in the air, that will tend to, on net, either cancel out the force of gravity pulling downward or mostly do it. Because one of the things is, clouds do in fact fall, but they tend to do so very slowly, kind of like a feather, right? why don't feathers fall at the same rate as rocks of the same mass? Like if you drop a 2-gram feather and a 2-gram pebble, the pebble hits first. That's because of the forces acting on the feather from air resistance. And air resistance is another force that pushes up. Most things that fall are going to have air resistance that's weaker than the force of gravity, which is why they do in fact fall. It's the same thing with a parachute, right? But you have to sum all the forces together to figure out how an object is going to move. And if your object is as small as a tiny water droplet that's essentially microscopic, which is what clouds are mostly made up of until they actually start precipitating, when you sum up those forces, things like air resistance and Brownian motion, both of which can act counter to gravity, are going to be strong enough to keep the cloud up for a very long time. And so the question that I have for you is that you say that you're really into things like repeatable, observable science. And the fact is that Brownian motion, air currents, water vapor, water mists, all of these are things that are very easy to experiment on with basically the stuff you've got in your house. Now, gravity might be a little bit of a thing that you would have to do a little work to experiment on, but it's actually doable, right? You can get yourself big old weights and some torsion bars, and sure, maybe you'd have to save up, but you can probably do it for a few $100s. Like, if it's something that's within the means of most people to set up an experiment to demonstrate and measure the force of gravity. So, have you bothered to do any experiments with water vapor, with Brownian motion, with gravity? Like, have you done any of these things?
No, I am a like YouTube surfer that will watch other people's experiments and then ponder on that. But I mean,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, isn't gravity like the bending of space-time actually, and it's like not a force at the end of the day? Please keep me honest on that. Like,
so the word force in this context means a few different things. It is not a force in the typical Newtonian sense, technically speaking, because it is, yes, the bending of space-time and how objects evolve in space-time as a consequence of that. But it is a force in the sense that it refers to a fundamental interaction in nature. It is one of the 4 fundamental forces. The other ones also are not forces in the Newtonian sense. I mean, certainly the weak interaction, I'm not aware of anything that has a particular great analogy. You can make electricity and magnetism behave in a very Newtonian way, and the strong force, you can model that also in a way that looks sort of vaguely Newtonian, but fundamentally they're also all quantum. They are not Newtonian. But for the distinction between general relativity and Newtonian gravity is one that after Newton came up with the theory of gravity, it took a few hundred years for anybody to even realize that there was a problem at all, for any observation to be contradictory to the Newtonian model. It's one of these things where you can say so much, so usefully, so much more easily when you talk about it in terms of it being a force that obeys Newton's gravitational law. If you want to nitpick about it, like, sure, okay, but at scales that you're going to measure with an experiment that you could build yourself, you are not going to need anything beyond the Newtonian approximation to Einsteinian.
I get it. I just wanted to hear how you would relay that to like a layman like myself. That makes sense. My next kind of follow up is because I get it. I understand where you're coming from. Is just how can these other forces like buoyancy And I even saw today, like, the electrostatic force is apparently 10 to the 15th. I've even seen 10 to the 36th more powerful than gravity.
Okay.
And okay, electrostatic is that much stronger than gravity? Like,
Yeah.
that's incredible to me. Like, shouldn't, and buoyancy itself too. Like, for example, if Newton was sitting in a puddle of water up to his head and that apple fell and he was underwater, it wouldn't have hit him. Water is stronger than gravity. You know, a helium balloon is an anti-gravity device. Like,
here's an important thing: buoyancy
is gravity.
Is gravity. You cannot have the buoyant force without gravity.
That's blowing my mind. Sorry.
So buoyancy, for one, it only I think is well defined in the context of a mass being inside some sort of fluid. It can be a gas or a liquid. Fluid means a thing that flows, and both gases and liquids flow.
Or a superfluid too, Dr. Tapiocaweasel.
Yes, I.
Sorry.
Don't forget superfluids. No.
Oh, I don't. I studied Bose-Einstein condensation in grad school, and that forms a wonderful superfluid.
We stand plasmas here on the Dapper Dino channel, by the way.
Yeah. But I lost my train of thought.
Buoyancy.
Sorry, that was like a loaded ton of questions in there. Sorry.
What is happening with buoyancy is you have an object and it's inside a fluid, and that fluid has pressure, and because the fluid is exerting pressure downwards, there needs to be a sort of preferred direction that down needs to exist in some way for you to have buoyancy. It doesn't necessarily have to be gravitational. For example, in the context of if you're in a train car and that train car starts steadily accelerating forward at 9.8 meters per second, and you closed all the windows and you don't know where you are, you can't see outside of your train car, and you have a helium balloon, before that car starts accelerating, that balloon will go up. Mm-hmm. Assuming that the rest of the air is normal air. Once that car begins accelerating at 9.8 meters per second, that helium balloon is going to go backwards forwards. It's going to go forwards. And it'll be at a 45-degree angle because the acceleration of the whole room is now accelerating also forwards at 9.8 meters per second.
Well, the angle will depend on the acceleration from gravity versus the acceleration of the train forward.
Yes,
it could go at a number of different angles.
It could, but I'm saying you accelerate forward at 1g, and then it'll be 45, if you accelerate just a little bit, it's just sort of going to roll across the ceiling or something. Well,
actually, when you break it down, buoyancy itself is another force that isn't really a force on its own.
Yeah.
It is dependent on other things existing, in this case, other forces. And, when we talk about these quote-unquote fictitious forces, which isn't a bad name because they're not fictional, right? They actually are there. You can measure them. But they're things that are apparent forces that exist because of the context you're in. You can see these all the time. Like, have you ever been to a carnival and there's that ride that spins you around pretty fast and the floor drops out and you stick to the back of the ride and you don't fall down?
Gravitron. Yeah, exactly. I like that one.
That's using centripetal force to be which is a fictional force, right? There's no fundamental centripetal force. It's just your momentum constantly being shifted into a circle that pushes you from your point of view staying stationary compared to the thing you're being pushed against. There's not an actual force there. It's just you getting pushed by your own momentum. And so... sorry, to nitpick, the centrifugal force is the fictional one. You're correct.
The centripetal one is the one that has to resist the fictional centripetal one, and the only...
You are correct.
The reason that you have a real one and not a fake one is because that coordinate system is not inertial, and that's why
you are right.
It's a thing.
Yeah,
but yes.
I meant to say centrifugal force. I'm sorry about that.
The force pushing you in and keeping you from flying out it's a real force, just like that is too. So
so it's...
Was that a threat? I didn't mean that to be a threat.
It's okay. So these sort of pseudo forces that are measurable things that act on matter in certain frames of reference are things we measure and encounter all the time. And so the question is always, okay, so is this acting like a force in my current context? And the fact is that in the context of you sitting on Earth, gravity acts like a force. Now, if you want to say, okay, well, what if I'm flying through the universe, not particularly orbiting anything, and just following my local geodesic path, then okay, sure. In that case, gravity's probably not acting very much like a force for you. You can probably better think about it as you following a straight path through a curved space-time. Great. But my guess is that currently, you are sitting in a chair on Earth, which means that in that context, the easiest way to think about gravity is as a force, because in that context, it acts very much like a force.
Gotcha. It seems to be really selective and weak. And
well,
again,
it's not selective at all. It acts on everything equally based on its mass.
Everything with mass or energy density, I guess. But.
Well, do you know how fragile seedlings are? Like, how can that not pull it down?
It does pull it
down. Trillions of gallons of water it holds down on a spinning ball.
It pulls both
and
of
I'm
them
just
down.
speaking that just sounds so illogical when you.
Oh, Michael? We're having no luck today with Michael and a tech.
Yeah. Censorship.
You know what?
No,
yeah, I think NASA.
You cut out for a moment.
Yeah, NASA is coming for you, Michael. You just froze for a while. There's a NASA kill team on the way.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. You know what? My internet has been down today. There was a large storm. It was restored earlier today, but it's been weak. So I'm sorry about that.
The thing is, like we were talking about before, where you need to figure out the sum of forces to figure out how any particular body is going to act. Seedlings that have, like, a little tuft of strands so they float through the air, like dandelion seeds or whatnot, they are pulled down by gravity just as strongly as anything else that weighs as much. But because of their structure, there are other greater forces that act on them for a while so that they can overcome gravity temporarily, like the buoyant force, like air resistance, and things like that. It's the same reason feathers fall more slowly than rocks in an atmosphere, right? But if you get a vacuum chamber, which you can do, you can get a vacuum pump and get a glass vacuum cylinder, you can pump out enough air so that feathers and pebbles will fall at measurably about the same speed. Now, granted, you're never going to pump all of the air out, especially in a little home vacuum pump with a glass cylinder. I mean, if you could, you would probably shatter the glass, and that would be very dangerous. But you can get it to the point where it's not going to be, for you, measurably different. And that's because there's a different sum of forces acting on those in the gas chamber, the vacuum chamber. Essentially, it's just gravity. But in the world where we live, where there's lots of air, because, I'm breathing, so I'm pretty sure there's lots of air around here. Also, I see wind all the time. Or I see the effects of wind, I should say. We have other forces to worry about. And so, does the ocean have wings or little strands of fronds that come out that help it float? No, it doesn't. It's just a bunch of water. So there's nothing for the ocean to use to overcome the force of gravity in bulk. However, there's such thing as sea spray. That is tiny bits of the ocean that get separated from the large mass, and those in fact do frequently overcome gravity temporarily to go fly into the air. That's why there's often a mist near the ocean. That's why, even though you're not in the direct path of waves, if you're near a place with pretty heavy waves, you get sprayed on. That's the ocean temporarily overcoming gravity because of other forces in tiny amounts. So, yes, gravity pulls just as hard on seedlings, on the ocean, anything with that same mass, it's going to pull on just as hard. And you can measure it if you want to. You might have to get some equipment like a vacuum chamber and a scale, but you can still measure it. And so there is no contradiction here. There's just people ignoring some of the relevant forces. And it's true, when we do physics problems, we like to ignore a lot of forces, right? There's the joke about, assume a spherical frictionless cow. Which is a completely ridiculous thing, doesn't exist. In the real world, you can't ignore real forces, which is
That's
why...
not how cow.
Well, okay, to be fair, there are spherical cows, but they're not frictionless.
Not at all.
Yeah, there's actually a weird thing that happens every once in a while where a cow embryo just kind of develops into a sphere with a bunch of fur on the outside and a bunch of sort of undifferentiated meat on the inside.
Oh, lovely.
And technically, it's a spherical cow.
That sounds horrifying.
It is horrifying.
That sounds like a Lovecraftian horror.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a roughly spherical cow, but it does have friction, so
Wow.
So,
okay,
but
you guys have explained that. Is it okay if we change more questions or?
Yeah,
just,
absolutely.
And I appreciate. I listen and hear all of those explanations. I'm going to ponder on that. If this is okay, I have a lot. Like, there's just again tons of questions that come to mind.
Hit us.
So this one would convert me in 2 seconds. Back, it would actually revert me, because for 30 plus years I've been obviously a heliocentric follower. This one would put me back. Can somebody please circumnavigate the globe with a 4K camera attached to it, north over the North Pole and just around, and then someone do it east and west? Because I believe the history of the recorded people that have done it east and west. I have yet to find any good footage of anybody doing it north to south, where it's over the North Pole and just comes back down. Because then that would be impossible on a flat level surface that I am envisioning.
So there's a one big thing, which is, generally speaking, let me 1 second. Generally speaking, the public, especially the public that has money to do things like grab a plane with a 4K constant video feed, and excuse me for being a little crass, just doesn't give a shit about flat earthers, right? So what you're asking for is for someone to do a very expensive, very time-consuming thing for the edification of people who most people see as just a bunch of morons that they don't care about. No, by the way, Nancy Millstone for $4.99 says, I've been looking forward to you taking on a flat earther for a while, sir, with a Godzilla, or at least an attempt at a Godzilla emoji. So thank you very much. So it's the same thing, like, this happens sometimes with creationists, which is what I normally cover. Like, this is not primarily a flat earth channel. This is mostly a like anti-evolution type creationism thing. Where they'll look at a video and say, well, this doesn't prove evolution, and it's like, it wasn't trying to. That's not the goal. Very few people have it as their goal to prove the globe Earth, because for the vast majority of the population, including every single expert out there, there is no need to do so. We already did that hundreds of thousands of years ago, actually.
Yeah.
So it makes as much sense for someone right now to go out and try to prove the globe as it does to try to prove that water gets you wet when you touch it. There's no reason for most people to do it. Now, if you are someone who wants to do something to prove this, start a GoFundMe. There's a whole bunch of flat earthers out there. You can hire...
There's a couple that I think want to pay a lot of money to see it. I mean, yeah, I would love to see it. No, I totally get what you're saying. Not worth the trouble, the time. It might even be dangerous from what I've researched over the North Pole due to
right?
compass interference.
What is the flight path you want to see? Because it wouldn't be, so again, a flat level, you wouldn't be able to go around either direction. So again, north and south, and then east and west. We've done east and west, I'm convinced. I've seen Amelia Earhart, many pilots have done it east to west, but that still works when you unravel. Do you need it in one flight?
It would just be impossible. That would put the flat level plane to end if somebody has circumnavigated
I would say
north to south. And I haven't found any good videos but I will say, I think, people have.
It would be like 20 hours no, God, how long would it be? It would be like 36 hours of flying. I think people would say it's fake.
I agree. That's always, I agree.
I think you'd have to be on it.
Well, yeah, no, again, send some flat earther up there with them or something. There is compelling evidence of the east to west, though. Like, there are obviously documented crews that have been with, I can't name the pilots, but that one question.
You accept the existence of these east to west circumnavigations. But there is no 4K uncut footage of any of them. That's never been a thing that's ever happened, right? For one thing, I don't know that it's physically possible to make an uncut 4K video that long. I don't know that we actually have like storage capacity.
Don't get stuck on the 4K. That was just an example.
Okay,
just somebody do it north to south circumnavigation. That would because it would be like Pac-Man. You would just pop out on the other side, and then you would be really dead in the water. But I haven't seen any compelling good. And again, link me, show me. There could be some footage out there.
For instance, there's literally no footage of Amelia Earhart's trip around the world, which almost made it. She didn't.
Sure. The reason I give credence and believe it is because that is possible. An east to west navigation is possible on the current flat Earth models, which are hard to get.
Okay, so here's a problem.
You could do that east
what
to
I
west.
just heard you say is, I have two standards of evidence. One lower standard of evidence for evidence that is compatible with a flat Earth, and one higher standard of evidence for evidence that is incompatible with the flat Earth. That's literally what I just heard you say.
I guess that's a good point, but I think they would both be the same. I just want to see somebody go north to south, or not even see it.
I mean,
I haven't found any. I would love to see one. Link it. I mean, again, that is the killer of the flat Earth. Having documented, again.
I mean, just a quick search, right? San Diego pilot completes pole-to-pole circumnavigation. San Diego resident Robert Laurentis, an aviator and former Navy officer, describes his unique journey Wednesday after completing a 9-month circumnavigation from the South Pole to the North Pole to spread a message of peace. That's literally on the first page of Google results. So when you say, I've never seen it, the only thing I can come up with is you haven't checked. Right? Now, I'm sure that you will come up with...
I'm Googling. This was the big one, and I totally have looked at it. Hold on. Oh yeah, look at the line they make on this one. I'm looking at the generative AI result right now. The line is super wonky.
I'm never going to take the word of generative AI for anything. They hallucinate nonsense all the time. Right?
So yeah, no. Again, here's another. I will say you are right. You are right. I do have some high level of evidence just based upon the fuckery. Oh, excuse my language.
It's okay. We get one free one on this channel.
I due to the kind of the weird inconsistencies I see with some of the NASA kind of stuff they output.
Well, I haven't brought up NASA except to point out that they're probably on the way to get you. So, now, real quick, I just want to say, Jake Nelson for $5 says, AIG, that's Answers in Genesis, is an impressive satchel of impressive male members. Thank you very much. Olivia Williams, who's been a member for 20 months and is at the Tetrapod level, says, cheer for spherical cows with a King Ghidorah emoji. So thank you very much for that, too. There's a big problem here, right? Where, actually, you know what? This is something that a lot of flat earthers are, and I don't want to make assumptions because I was about to make an assumption, and I don't want to do that. I'm going to ask you now. I know a lot of flat earthers are Christians. Are you? Because I was about to assume you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you know that in the Bible it says to use equal scales, right? Now, at the most literal level, this is an injunction to not cheat people in commerce. But I think we can make a wider application, which is to say we need to treat things fairly. And when you say that I have a higher standard of evidence for things that would be incompatible with the flat Earth than things that are not incompatible with the flat Earth, what I am hearing you say is that you are not treating these two propositions with equal scales. You are saying it requires special extra evidence for me to believe the globe, whereas I will be much more credulous about the flat Earth. And what I want to know is, why is that? What justification do you have for rejecting the numerous pole-to-pole navigations that are around and have just as much evidence as the east-to-west circumnavigations? I mean, none of the circumnavigations from east to west followed a straight great circle line around the equator, right? They all went up and down.
The only thing that'll do that is a satellite. And then we are having the NASA conversation, which is...
Well, there's other things besides NASA that put up satellites.
Yeah.
But.
Great, you know what I mean. Great question to hold me to that. Don't want to have double standards at all. But again, I'm looking at the north to south routes right now, and I am now remembering why I was so kind of sketched out by it. I mean, that is a very, very
I haven't seen this. Can somebody screen share?
Yeah, I'm doing Pan Am Flight 50s. I can link it to our.
Well, I mean, I don't believe any commercial flights circumnavigate the globe because there's.
Agreed. No, I'm not asking for that. I mean, I'm just looking at this one, and it's a little deceptive.
You should be able to present if you want to. There should be a present button, and you should be able to find that window. We can just put it up and take a look at it.
Sure. Here we go.
Just, don't bomb my channel with enough content.
No, not here. I come in peace and goodwill.
All right, this does not look like something that's going to get me taken down. Although, a friend of mine did get her friend's channel taken down for her drawing too many circles in too suggestive of a manner. So, okay.
So this is a north to south. Explain this to me. I mean, because this one, I didn't understand it. Maybe I'm completely off here.
Well, first of all,
is this
the map is cut off a little bit. So when it says South and North Pole, I do believe that he flew over those, but they're not currently on the map. So they are represented by off-location dots, which is, I mean, somewhat true for all of these dots, right? But what we're getting here is, so when you see Auckland, right, and then going over to number 4 towards San Francisco, that's going across the international date line, which is completely opposite on the globe model from the prime meridian, which runs approximately through London, right? It actually runs through Greenwich, whatever. So this is two opposite sides of the Earth, but if you notice, if you try to go up the international date line, there's just a whole bunch of nothing. Planes can't fly that far. So one of the things about this is, just like with the east to west, right, where you have to make deviations from a perfect great circle line in order to do the circumnavigation, you are going to have to make deviations from a perfect great circle path for a north to south thing. So what this is it is the equivalent of any of the east to west circumnavigations that you tend to accept, but it's going north to south. But because they are displaying this on what looks like it's approximately a Mercator projection, it looks like it's just a circle that's being drawn not over not even a circle, but it looks like it's just a bunch of lines over this flat projection. If you were to look at this on a globe, you would see that, yeah, this actually approximately covers one full circle, as long as you actually put the north and south poles over the north and south poles. So, what is the problem that you're seeing with this?
I'm having a hard time, conceptualizing that,
So, what we could do... How many locations are there? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 locations on there. We could go to Google Earth. We could put those locations on there, and then we could spin the Google Earth thing.
I would love to see that. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, I'll share that screen with you if you want, Dr. Tapiocaweasel.
Yeah, that would be great.
Can you pull that up?
I will do that. Let me get that ready.
Actually, while we're working on that, Ilya Latis, which I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name right. If I'm not, please correct me, preferably with the International Phonetic Alphabet, if possible. If not, then just try to approximate it. Asks a great question. Do you have a flat Earth map that works for navigation? Because all of the navigational charts used in both aviation and navigation on the ocean are all based on globe projections, right? They're all assuming a globe. Do you have a flat Earth map? Because the thing is, if the Earth is flat, it should be trivially easy to make a map of it, because you don't need to project it. You just make a scaled down version of it on a flat piece of paper.
Yeah, no, I personally do not have a map. I would love to be on the first boat that is allowed, full of flat earthers, that is allowed to go to Antarctica. But
I mean, boats are allowed to go to Antarctica all the time. Just charter one.
Yeah, have you seen how gate kept that is?
It's not gate kept at all. You need to alert the local authorities.
Now that is,
and that's
so that is where I will push back, because that is something I am confident in. Okay. The Antarctic Treaty, the actual paperwork required to go there is insane. Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Which section of the Antarctic Treaty is the one that says this?
I will refer to you to a video, because it's kind of quite long, but I can bring that video up.
The Antarctic Treaty right here. It's let's see, it's 7 pages on a PDF. It's quite short.
Correct.
Which article
yes.
of the Antarctic Treaty
I have
specifically
seen that
forbids
one.
this?
So I have seen that one. You have to get full scientific permission. It is outrageous. And yes, you are talking
Which
about
article?
the easily Googleable. You are talking about the first result of the Antarctic Treaty that's been put up there in the last years. Go check the Wayback Machine and see when that URL came up. Anyway.
Okay, so there's a. Are you saying that the Antarctic Treaty that's searchable
let me
on
do
the
some
internet?
Research. Yes.
Well, I want to understand what your claim is.
Real quick.
I want to understand
My
what the
claim is that the common man. Have you ever heard of Lars Anderhall? He went there, had his crew forcibly removed. There are boats patrolling that area. You cannot get to Antarctica. I will show you a video. I will look at it. My claim is that it is impossible for the common man to go fully unrestricted to Antarctica. You have to go to a certain area. You have to go and be chaperoned. You have to pay outrageous sums of money.
Michael,
yes, that's my claim. There we go.
I need to clarify something. Are you claiming that the Antarctic Treaty, as is available on a PDF online in multiple locations, is not actually the one that was signed originally in the aftermath of World War II? And that there is another Antarctic Treaty, which is the one that the governments that are signatories to the treaty are actually beholden to? Is that a part of your claim?
I don't understand that question really. I mean,
okay,
I'm sure that the one that they signed on paper is not what they put online. Yeah.
So yes, there's a different. So there's two versions of the Antarctic Treaty. There's the one you can find online, and then there's the real one that the countries involved signed. That is not the same one as the one you can find online, right?
I wouldn't know the answer to that. I really wouldn't. I'm not saying that I wouldn't know, but I'm telling you.
Here's the thing:
I've watched very compelling videos.
If that's not the case, right? There's two possibilities. The Antarctic Treaty that's online is the real one, in which case nothing in it says anything about any of the stuff that you're talking about. I've read the entire thing. I started to translate some of it into Klingon for fun.
Nerd.
Yeah, I'm a giant nerd. This is not news.
That's pretty cool. Let me find this video real quick. It's one of my favorites because
for copyright reasons, I'm going to be hesitant to have a video played on this.
Sure. I understand.
Dr. Tapiocaweasel, have you found the approximate locations that were mentioned on that other map?
Yes, I'm adding the last two right now.
Okay, cool.
So that we'll have little pins.
One of the things I'm going to say is if you want to claim that that the treaty says something that is not what is indicated in the online versions that are publicly available, I'm going to want to know what evidence you have of an original or different treaty. And if the answer is, well, if there isn't a different treaty, then I wouldn't be allowed to do the thing I think I'm not allowed to do, that is not evidence. That is lying. Because you are claiming a thing for which there is no evidence that you have simply made up to excuse something else that otherwise you would know is not true. As far as I'm concerned, that's a lie. So if you are going to, at any point, claim that there is a conspiracy and you do not have sufficient evidence to back up the conspiracy, I will dismiss it out of hand and conclude that you are being dishonest.
I seem to have stumbled upon something that has triggered you a little bit.
Yes, blatant dishonesty triggers me.
You're playing your hand a little too much here, Dapper. It is common knowledge today that the common man cannot get to Antarctica and be fully unfettered in their own exploration. And by unfettered, I mean no government assistance, no gatekeeping, no landing. Nobody can go there right now.
You know, there was a woman who just skied across Antarctica, right? That's a thing that happened.
Yes, and I'm sure that we're going to find out that there is some interesting sponsors behind that. Again,
it's expensive to survive in Antarctica. It's not a great place to live.
Listen, I'm open to that. If there's truly compelling good footage of somebody skiing across Antarctica, then flat Earth is done.
Once again, you are accepting some things with a much lower level of evidence.
I'm saying if there's really good evidence, like I said, today you can easily fake stuff.
The woman who skied across Antarctica kept photos and wrote about it and published the photos. There is more evidence of a ski trip across Antarctica.
I've got them all. Nice. I've got them all marked out.
We're going to take a look in just a second. There is more evidence of a ski trip across Antarctica than there is of the Amelia Earhart flight. We don't have photos of all her stops. We just have reports that she stopped in those places.
Okay, so
let's real quick. Spud Byro for $5 says he mentioned a flat Earth model. Has he explained what that is yet? I was late to the stream. My understanding is that so far you have not given a flat Earth model, but to be fair, I have not actually asked you for one. So I'm not going to say that is inappropriate because you did that. But let's take a look. Can we start at the North Pole? And then
Sure.
Let's go in the direction that the flight went, which I believe is first to London.
So here we are.
This is the North Pole.
Huh?
Can you zoom in on is that the North Pole?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the ice?
I mean,
they're not showing. They don't show sea ice on this.
Yeah, that's clearly based on topographical maps of the sea.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was just water.
Well, that's what
it's not just water. But I mean, yes, in that sense. But they're not going to show the big shelves up.
Real quick, MK Ultra for 30 new shekels says, I read the treaty live on TikTok with a flurf. Kept claiming this crap was written in it, but in a way that only smart people can get. They don't want to know. They want their fantasy. I can't super disagree. Here's the thing, right? This is just a general rule.
I want off this ride. Trust me, I want off this ride. I want to go back to enjoying Star Trek: The Next Generation. I literally love that series. Jean-Luc Picard is the best captain. The writing on that series is amazing. But since having this kind of weird awakening, don't assume. I want off the ride. Please prove this wrong. I would love to.
Well, let's take a look at the circumnavigation path. So what do we got here?
Okay, so we're starting at the North Pole, and then we go to London. Mm-hmm. Okay, and let me orient that so that's south. So we went from here to here. Also, by the way, zooming out, you can only see 3 of the dots. So that's interesting. Okay. So from London, we go south to Cape Town. Okay, and notice that you cannot see Auckland. You cannot see Auckland here at all. And then from Cape Town, we go to the South Pole there. And then from there, we basically just keep going in a straight line over this. Oh, crap. I just missed the thing.
Yeah, it's because when you hit
the middle of the South Pole is where he said he landed?
Well, no, he didn't land there. He flew over it.
Yeah, I don't know what the South Pole, I'm just going off. I'm going based off of the little graphic before, which just had labels. Yeah, it just had labels.
The South Pole is actually under a glacier. You can't land an aircraft on it because there's a glacier there. You can only fly over it, or I suppose you could walk over it if you landed somewhere else. But yeah, it's physically not possible to land anything but a helicopter on the South Pole, and helicopters don't have the range to do this kind of flight. So. Real quick, Vandalia998 for $4.99 says, the common man has trouble affording a trip to Disney World. Doesn't mean we can't get there. I mean, that is true. All right, so yeah, the trip between Cape Town and Auckland is nearly a straight shot.
Cape Town? Yes. And then to Auckland, basically a straight shot. And then we just keep going. And you do sort of depart off to the east here because I guess they didn't want to land in Hawaii. I would have landed in Hawaii. That would have been cool.
No, that's pretty sufficient for me. I mean, that looks like a pretty north-south thing. I will have to look more into this, but again, thanks for charting that out. That's pretty good.
The thing that concerns me, though, is that this is the report of a circumnavigation north to south that came up on the first page of the Google results, right? This wasn't very hidden.
Yeah.
Now, why didn't you check on it?
I mean, I have, and I mean, I don't want to get more into I would like to research this more, and I definitely did look, but a lot of the stuff, again, I want to just do my own research.
All right, so I do want to explain something, which is about my general opposition to simply asserting conspiracies. The thing is that when you fail to provide evidence for a claim, and then you simply say that there is a conspiracy, which is why you do not have the evidence for your claim, all you have done is actually make a second claim, And now you still have to provide the evidence for the first claim, but you also have to provide evidence of the conspiracy. Saying that there is a conspiracy does not actually help your claim become more plausible. For instance, if I say, actually, aliens land nightly in my backyard, but I don't have any pictures of it because there's a conspiracy to erase the pictures I take via the 5G network and the implanted nanobots that I got when I got my COVID vaccine booster. All that means is now I have to show not only that there are the aliens there by getting around the conspiracy somehow, but I also have to show you how the photos are being erased, who's erasing them, and how that ties into the alleged nanobots that I have, right? All of that just makes it harder for me to demonstrate my claim. So when you say, well, they're actually following a treaty that isn't available online, what now you have to do is not only do you have to demonstrate that people aren't allowed to go to Antarctica and go, say, ski across to the South Pole and then to the other side of Antarctica, which is a thing that was documented as happening. Not only do you have to say that, but you also have to then demonstrate that there is another version of the treaty. And I don't think that you can, because, well, quite frankly, if anyone could demonstrate that, they would have already done so.
Yeah, you're getting hung up on the treaty thing.
Well, it's because you brought it up.
No. You're getting hung up on the duplicate Antarctic treaty. Like, I don't think there's a duplicate. There could be. I don't know. I'm saying that within those words of the Antarctic Treaty and within the actual tangible steps of getting a permit to have unfettered access, it is extremely hard. Do you or do you not have to get approval from like multiple countries and be at their whim?
No, what you need to do is alert them so that when you almost come close to dying, they know where you are so they can come save you. But technically, there's nothing they can do if you just land there, because none of them actually control that territory. Now, to be fair, Argentina claims to control a large little section of Antarctica, but they don't actually practically police it, so they can't actually do anything about that. So I suppose Argentina might make the claim that you're illegally immigrating to the Argentinian territory in Antarctica. But for practical purposes, they don't actually enforce any of those territorial claims, even though if you take the tour boat from Argentina to the part of Antarctica that they claim, they're like, oh no, we're not going to anything that's not Argentina. This is just a domestic trip between two different parts of Argentina. Which, it's not really true, but whatever. We'll let them have that. I'm not here to contest the Argentinian territorial claims in Antarctica. But the reason that people do things like alert treaty members and give travel plans and pay for like escorts and transportation is because Antarctica is one of the most hostile to human life places that you can possibly go to. It is nearly impossible to find a place that is more dangerous to go on the surface of the Earth besides like the top of the Himalayas. And numerous people die up there.
Yeah.
Just even much more mild places. Like, I have family that lives in Alaska, which is much more mild than Antarctica. And I just told a story on my last stream. I had a cousin who almost died because he was stuck outside for about 10 minutes. That's all it took.
Yeah.
And he was about to die. And Antarctica is considerably harsher and considerably colder than the area my cousin lives in, which is around Anchorage. Like, we're not talking about Barrow, Alaska in the far north, or like Svalbard, which is not Alaska, but it's also like the northernmost city on the planet. You're in a place where the refrigerators are heated and the freezers aren't temperature controlled. You are in a place where if you do not have goggles on, your eyeballs will freeze in under a minute. The reason people alert governments is because they don't want to die because they went to Antarctica, because that might suck. That's not a fun vacation. They want to have a lifeline.
I've never tried to go to Antarctica, so I don't have any.
Look, I got upset today. I got upset yesterday because the temperature dropped to like -2 Celsius, and I was ready to start a riot. So yeah, there's no way I'm going to Antarctica. That's not what I would call a fun time. Look, I'm a Ceratosaurus. We're from a desert in the Mesozoic. I like it hot and dry. It's dry in Antarctica, but it is not hot. There's a reason I live in Arizona by choice.
The other thing I want to just have you consider, Michael, when you do sort of look at that route is the distances of each of those legs Do those make sense both on the globe and on a flat Earth, and also the angles
which they do
between the legs, and if those make sense?
Yeah.
Because you seemed a little bit surprised when we pulled it up and how the shot across Antarctica looked. It was even straighter than I was sort of expecting. I don't.
Yeah, no, that's hey. If I come back, I'm going to definitely look into that with a new fresh look. Can I play this TikTok video of somebody breaking down the Antarctic Treaty for us, or is that
again? I'm hesitant to simply randomly play videos.
I get
especially
you.
Where
I
don't
understand.
have control over the pause button because I am producing this, and when I have control over the pause button, it's pretty easy for me to just
I totally get it. YouTube,
real quick,
YouTube
for $5,
can
Jake Nelson says conspiracy theories are the reversal of Occam's razor, which I tend to agree with that. Yeah. Do you know about Occam's razor?
You know what? It's basically the most simplest is the correct, right?
Almost.
It's to be preferred.
Yeah. So
it's closer.
All things being equal, the explanation that makes the fewest otherwise unfounded assumptions is to be preferred until it no longer accounts for the observations or the principles that you're trying to explain. So, for instance, if I say, okay, look, there's boiling water on the stove. I think it's because the induction burner is on. That's one explanation, right? There's no visible fire, but I have an induction stove. I have a pot that works with induction stove. I don't actually have an induction stove. This is a hypothetical. So yeah, that makes sense. Now, another option might be that there's an invisible dragon who's breathing invisible fire underneath my pot that is powered by nuclear fission of plutonium in his dragon heart. Okay, maybe. But the only unfounded assumption I'm making with the induction burner is that the burner is on. With the dragon, there's a whole lot of stuff like that there are dragons, that they can be invisible, that they're powered by nuclear energy, that their fire is invisible. That's a whole lot of assumptions. So a conspiracy theory is almost always going to be a violation of Occam's razor, because when you say, the reason I don't have evidence of X or I can't do X is because of a conspiracy, you have to assume the conspiracy. Whereas if the reason is something else, like the reason I can't just go to Antarctica, or let's go, not the Antarctica, like the reason that I think I will be stopped from going to Antarctica, which I have not tested that I will be stopped, I simply believe other people about this, is that there is a conspiracy. Now you've assumed that, one, you will be stopped, you haven't actually demonstrated that, and you've assumed that the reason for this is an otherwise unevidenced conspiracy. Boneworm, which is a great name, by the way, boneworms are a real thing, and they like to feed on whale carcasses at the bottom of the ocean, and it's creepy. The reason, this is for $5, the reason the thing wants to get inside Outpost 31 is because Antarctica is literally that freaking hostile. Yeah. Which, by the way, great movie. Have you seen The Thing?
I've not.
Oh my goodness.
That's like an old movie.
Yeah, it's
like
1982, I want to say. I'm not sure. It might be 1984.
It is.
With Kurt Russell. Excellent movie. Okay, Dr. Tapiocaweasel, you have homework.
Okay.
Go watch The Thing. It's also got Wilford Brimley without a mustache, and you will not recognize him because he doesn't have a mustache.
Does he have diabetes?
Presumably he has diabetes, but he doesn't have a mustache, and it's like, I remember when I learned that was Wilford Brimley, I'm like, wait a minute, that's Wilford Brimley? Where's his mustache? It's like, for me, there's no such thing as a Wilford Brimley sans mustache. Real quick, Christopher Sanford for £5 says, a friend from university spent a year in Antarctica, in Antarctica after graduating, counting the wildlife there. If an impoverished student can get funded to go, Ellipsis. Actually, someone who's been on this channel a few times, and who I do a infrequent but regular news show with on another channel, Landon Knoll, has been to Antarctica numerous times. He actually has a shot glass from one of the stations down there that was actually forged from the glass, from like discarded glass containers that were sent to there for various uses. And it's got engraved on it the name of the station that he was at and all that stuff. He goes down there for... basically, he's a volcanologist, and there's volcanoes in Antarctica. So he goes down there to do volcanology stuff. I mean, lately he's been doing a lot of stuff in Hawaii, which I imagine is a lot more fun. It would be for me. Well, you know. So yeah, like, what are those people doing, right? Like, I know people who've been to Antarctica. Are they just lying to me?
Hey, I don't deny that McMurdo Station, Scott Base, like they're there. They're for real.
What are they?
Like, people
What are
go
they
there.
doing?
Hey, that's a good question. What wildlife is there? Why
Penguins.
even have a tree?
Penguins, seals,
Polar
terns.
bears, right?
No polar
No,
bears.
they don't have polar bears. Those are only up north.
Here's a fun.
If they had polar bears, they wouldn't have penguins.
Well, here's a cool little fact, right? Arctic actually means bear, right? It comes from the Greek arctos, which means literally means bear. The Antarctic is the no bear because it's the anti-Arctic. So one of the ways you can remember that there's no polar bears down there is it literally means the no bear place.
Dude, you've blown my mind.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Antarctica, it's literally named for the no bears that live there. In a roundabout way.
But
So,
yeah, what again? Why even? More taking a step back logically. Why have the treaty? It's just ice. It's not that cool of a place.
I can tell you.
I mean, it's very cold. Like,
I can
what
tell
are
you
they
exactly
doing?
why. So the Antarctic Treaty was formed in the aftermath of World War II. And the reason it was seen as important was twofold. One, the world had just seen the use of the most devastating weapons ever used in a war, even today, which were the nuclear bombings in Japan, right? When the US bombed 2 different cities in Japan, one of which I've been to. It was really weird to stand in the middle of a crater left by a nuclear explosion and realize how much lower I was than the street level of the city surrounding me, and that explosion caused that crater. It's a big deal. And I was getting there long after the fact, and it was still really eerie to stand at the bottom of that crater. I was in Nagasaki. Sorry. Second, there are confirmed instances where the Nazis attempted to use Antarctica as a staging location for military operations. And no one wanted Antarctica to become a staging ground for military operations in a world where such dangerous weapons existed. Especially since no one really has enforceable territorial claims down there, and it could be just a wild west of weapons testing, weapons development, military operations, all sorts of nonsense. It's the same reason there's a treaty that says that nothing outside of Earth, like the Moon or Mars, can be used for military purposes or claimed as the territory of any sovereign nation. Right? Like, the US can plant a flag on the Moon, but they're not allowed to claim territory there, and they're not allowed to put military installations up there. The highest you can go for military stuff is just satellites. There's a treaty about this. It's the same thing with Antarctica. All of these countries said, look, we are in a whole new world when it comes to weapons and destructive capacity of humanity, and we do not want to let this last unclaimed bit of Earth, if you accept that one little triangle out in the Sahara that 2 different countries say the other one owns, we'll ignore that one. Other than that, yeah, there's a little fight between, like, Sudan and one of the neighboring countries, and they're like, no, you own this triangle of land, and the other one's like, no, you do. And so neither one goes there, right? Anyway, so yeah, it's this last, other than like a few tiny places like that, like there's another island somewhere around like Eastern Europe that has a similar thing. So yeah, it's the only significant area of land that could be available that's not currently claimed by any sovereign country that can enforce those claims. And yeah, people didn't want the entire world getting blown up by atomic bombs launched from Antarctica, right? In places where there was no oversight from other countries. Res Instance for $5 redo says the only good Kurt Russell movie is Stargate. Escape from New York? Hello.
Escape from L.A.? The basketball scene from Escape from L.A. is a thing of cringe.
Yeah.
Pure, unadulterated cringe.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell does like a half-court dunk. Like, oh my gosh.
I think Michael and I might agree that Escape from New York is the superior movie in the Escape from Snake Plissken cinematic universe. So, you know what? Actually, interestingly, I do actually like it when I have, like, similar movie tastes to some of my guests with whom I disagree, because it's like, you know what? At least we got that going, right? Like, I even had G-Man on, and we started talking a little bit about movies, and it turns out that me and G-Man like some of the same movies. So I was like, all right, cool. That's great.
Hey, I appreciate getting learned and listening to people smarter than me. And yeah, and again, I thought I was waiting for more ad hominem attacks. You please continue.
I mean, would you like
feel
me to use an ad hominem?
No. Don't treat me like Kent Hovind. No, funny enough, Kent Hovind is not a flat earther.
He
so
is
you
not.
guys agree?
Although
You guys agree on that?
Yeah.
I will say I've
Yeah.
seen him try to defend the globe, and it was embarrassingly bad.
Yeah.
All of his arguments actually ended up being ad hominems. He was like, "You can't believe these flat earthers; they're idiots." As he holds a globe, and it's like, Kent, that's not an argument. That's just you being a dick, which is pretty common for him. But like, that's not an argument. So unfortunately, as far as I know, that video doesn't exist anymore because it was on his original channel that YouTube took down for repeated community guideline violations in terms of mostly him trying to tell people to eat poison. He did a lot of. He's still doing that. His son actually got in trouble with the FDA for trying to sell a book alleging to be medical advice in a package with poisonous seeds that he wanted you to eat on the advice of the book.
Nice.
Not great.
Yeah. He still sells both the poisonous seeds and the book, but he no longer packages them, so you have to add them to your shopping cart separately, and apparently that's A-okay. Which I'm not a big fan of, but whatever, I'm not in charge of any of that. I don't want to be in charge of any of that. So, I don't want to talk about Hovind on this stream anymore. I talk about him too much.
I had a question. I had a question I wanted to ask.
Yeah, you know what? Before you go, I was going to say I've got time. I'm a little under the weather today, guys. I will kind of log off. I do want to continue. Please do not take this as like I'm running away. I thought this was a great conversation, but I kind of want to wrap up soon here.
All right. Well, how about this?
If that's okay. I'd love to ask questions or whatever you wanted to do to end this up.
We'll say a few last things. Anyone who's in the chat, if you have a question, tag me or super chat real quick. And we don't have a whole lot of time, so if you have a question, tag me right now or super chat right now.
I wanted to
please be as blunt or as rude. I appreciate it. I want to be tested myself. Maybe your questions will lead to some good things. But again, I had some questions too. But yeah, whatever.
Sure. So my quick question would be: do you think that the ISS is a thing up in the sky?
I think most likely. So I do. A short answer. I will not deflect it. I do not believe in the ISS. I do not think that it's up there. I think that it is most likely being manipulated. And
what does that mean?
I would say that they're probably filming in the largest indoor, pool in the world in Houston, where they have a replica of the ISS. And that's based on, again, I will show claims, just hours of footage of just blunders, people. Gravity not working, not being uniform, people with harnesses and just these high, there's compilations of videos of people on the ISS being like, grabbing invisible harnesses, green screen failures, bubbles in space as well.
We don't have time to get into all of it, but it is interesting to hear your answers there. We do have a few questions and one super chat. The super chat is from Jake Nelson for $5, who says, "I have worked outside for over 20 years. Watching sunrise and sunset." Yeah, globe. Since it's not a question, I don't think we need to further get into that. But we do have a few actual questions with question marks. Tell Me More says, "Please ask him," I'm assuming it's Michael and not Dr. Tapiocaweasel, "how he thinks lunar and solar eclipses work." And I assume it's you, Michael, because I'm pretty sure I know how Dr. Tapiocaweasel thinks they work. So if you could give a quick rundown, if possible, of how you think lunar and solar eclipses work.
Great question. Definitely a subject that I think is important to this question. I'll say that I don't fully have an answer, to be honest, but there are some major questions. For example, when there is now correct me, a lunar eclipse is when the moon goes in front of the sun, correct?
No, that is a solar
eclipse. That is a solar eclipse. Okay, so I think we recently had a solar eclipse the other day, or
well, it was a few months ago, but yeah, we did.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. We're all blending together.
I get
anyway,
that.
The new year. So we had a solar
That one
eclipse
coming up in April,
day.
though.
On my birthday too.
Oh,
Very cool. April
awesome.
8th. Yeah.
Nice.
So the solar eclipse. My goodness! Like apparently the moon is going in front of the sun.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking all day for the moon. It's not there, and then all of a sudden there's something in front of the sun. Like, and I'm being told that. I didn't see the moon enter the field of view or leave the field of view.
You're aware of the lunar cycle, right? Like
correct,
moon,
like waxing and waning.
Yeah,
right. I'm aware of it now. Again,
okay. Do you know what the new moon is?
Yeah, I mean that's when it's not full, right?
That's when it's the opposite of full, right? That's as dark as it ever gets, right? Now, are you aware that when the new moon is when it's a new moon, the moon is always in the sky during the daytime, and it is always invisible unless there's a lunar eclipse. Because the sky itself is bright enough that you cannot see the now completely shadowed moon. So,
fascinating, very convenient.
Because in order for the moon to go between the Earth and the sun such that it covers up some of the sun, it has to be a new moon, because the new moon is when the sun is between the Earth and the sun. It's just not usually at an angle where the shadow of the moon falls on the Earth. But during an eclipse, it is, and this happens because the inclination of the orbit of the moon is not just flat on the equator, right? It's tilted, I think, about 15 degrees. I would have to double check. I don't carry that number around in my head. So because of that, sometimes...
I think it's 5.
Maybe it's 5, sure. Like I said, I don't carry that number around in my brain. I just know that it's not parallel to the equator. So because of that, most of the time, when it's a new moon, the shadow misses the Earth. But when the moon happens to be on a line so that it's close to the equator, it's close enough that the shadow is going to fall directly on the Earth, the people in that shadow will see the moon either completely or partially cover the sun, because that's what a shadow is, right? Like if you have the shadow, like if it's sunny out, right, and you put your hand up to block the sun, someone looking at you will see the shadow of your hand covering your eyes, because that's just what a shadow is, right? It's something impeding the light from the object that's casting light to the thing that's receiving the light. So that's all that is. The reason you can't see the moon is because you can never see the moon during the full moon. That happens every single month. The difference is just...
I know, and this is how ignorant I will admit, is that, like, I didn't know that, and I'm like, where the hell is the moon on this new moon? But it's supposed to be right above you. That, to me, is a little suspicious.
Well,
I mean...
it's supposed to be in the sky.
Of rock.
Yeah.
It's a chunk of rock. It should be at least glinting or showing, or, a chunk of rock according to that model. I mean...
What should be glinting on it?
I have no response. I will completely admit that you will have the correct response here, but I'm like, that just, to me, it blew my mind. I'm like, that seems weird, and I'm sure there's an explanation.
Okay.
But
if you jack up the gain on a camera, you get the timing just right, and you take the picture like right after, or you're looking at a very like a sliver moon where it's almost a new moon but not. The reflected light from Earth actually is bright enough that you can see some of it if you jack up the camera gain.
Yeah, but you have to use
your eyes can't. You need like a telescope or something. And the other thing is you have that bright thing right next to it, so your eyes aren't good at detecting dark things right next to bright things.
All right, we have.
But yeah,
I want to make sure that we get. Cool. I want to try to get through all the super chats. We only have one more currently. This is from Boneworm, and this is in reference to. Several of your statements, but more specifically about the ISS. So Boneworm says, who are they? Be specific, because you said they are manipulating it.
You know what? That is a great question, Boneworm. At this point, with generative AI, it could be what is they? But who, I really don't know, and I do not even want to get into that.
Okay, but you see the problem now. Now you have claimed that despite the fact that there is no particular... let's say that later on you can support your claims that the ISS is being faked. You haven't done so yet, but you've also now introduced a conspiracy.
Well, I've given reasons.
I'm just saying, for now, we haven't fully demonstrated it, right? If we have another one, then maybe you can come on and show why you think the ISS is fake.
Yeah.
But you've also you've added another claim that there is a conspiracy, which you will also have to demonstrate, right? You're going to have to say things like, here's how I know there's a conspiracy, here's who I have evidence is involved, here's why they would do it. But the thing is, I don't think you can. So again, you're using it.
I can.
Okay.
I can.
Well,
I just
we probably don't have time now.
I do.
But...
Well, no, I do have a job. I do have things to consider about speaking ill about things, and I at this point.
Well, I mean, NASA's already
really
on. NASA's already coming for you, so like it's too late now.
Friend, at least you know I am like not like a faker, but you know, let's be real. Like the claim of flat Earth is cognitively traumatic if it is true. And again, I'm not. Again, you've made all your claims. You do not think it is, but if that means that somebody out there has the ability to fake shit. So, and is very powerful across, again, this is used as evidence against flat Earth. Like, there's 72,000 physicists and astronauts from 90 different countries hiding this, obscuring this on purpose at this point.
Well, the reason that's evidence
that
is because...
a pretty powerful...
the reason that's evidence is the bigger a conspiracy is, the harder it is to continue the conspiracy. Yeah. There's a reason that actual historical conspiracies rarely involve more than like a dozen people, because there have been real conspiracies, right? Like we know about some conspiracies. Like you can say like there was a conspiracy to blame Spain for an explosion on a U.S. Navy ship that was actually just improperly stowed gunpowder that then launched into the Spanish-American War because a few American politicians wanted to go to war for territory with Spain. So they ginned up an excuse and they did it. But the number of people who were in on that fact was very low. That's a real conspiracy. It really happened, right? The Spanish-American War was a conspiracy. We know that. We know who was involved. We know why they did it. We also know it was a very small number of people, and even that number of people couldn't keep it under wraps indefinitely. So, yeah, the reason why this is seen as a problem for flat Earth is because...
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. But again, it is, that entity, again, there is, you can just pretty much YouTube and Google who's behind that, and that'll answer it for you. But
okay,
again, I see your point.
YouTube video saying anything.
Well, this one would be like the main, most common pointed to like entity that is just running a lot of shit on the planet.
Do we have a community note on this video yet? If anyone tells me if we have the linking you to Wikipedia for the flat Earth article, because I always find that funny.
So hold on. That needs to be a flat earther proof, or at least a small tangential one. Why in the world would they take the time to educate us and be like, flat Earth is an archaic and disproven theory?
They're not.
Let me put this under every single flat Earth one. Why don't they do that with it's like the Easter Bunny. Why don't they do that with Santa videos? Why don't they do that with things that are inconsequential? It is one of the most pervasive and pretty hardcore tags that they have out there. Like,
the reason for that. The reason for that is because there is not a community of people who are currently discouraging scientific investigation of the world around us on the basis of the reality of the alleged reality of Santa. That is why they're not doing it.
Whoa. Who says that we're discouraging
anyone who knows anything about science?
Wait.
I'm not sure I would necessarily agree.
That's fair.
They don't think they're discouraging.
No, they don't think that. But what's actually happening is
I would love to have more discovery. Yeah. I think we've actually hit like a pretty plateau recently.
Here's a common talking point I hear from a lot of flat earthers. They'll say things like, they'll quote the budget of NASA or very occasionally some other space agency, and they'll say, why isn't this being spent on? And they'll come up with something else. That right there,
that is an example.
That is an example of discouraging the continued scientific endeavors of the human species as a whole. Granted, only as funded by a particular nation, because that's what NASA primarily does. They do scientific investigation.
But you got to realize the people that don't want it think that they're not spending it really well.
I know.
That's where.
Here's the thing,
so
Michael.
It's really not like the spirit of
Michael. I need you to understand something.
Anti-exploration.
I need to understand something.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. The fact of the matter is, flat Earth is absolutely 100% ridiculously wrong. There is absolutely not a shred of possibility that it is true. And the fact of the matter is that no matter what the motive is of flat earthers, they are attempting to do things that, if accomplished, would drag humanity back thousands of years in terms of scientific progress. I know you disagree with me, and I'm not asking you to agree with me. But that is the perspective of virtually everyone on the basis of overwhelming evidence that has been accumulating for literally thousands of years. So until you can overcome that, which no one has even come close to doing, that is going to be the attitude of people generally. That you are a fundamentally anti-science and anti-progress force in the world that, sure, we don't need to worry about too much because, quite frankly, you're vanishingly rare as a part of the population, but that if we can write one little extra program that we insert into the various programs that run YouTube that automatically detects flat Earth content and then automatically puts a link, because there's no person doing that, right? Like there's no Bob sitting at like Google who's like, oh, this is a flat Earth video, I'm going to put the link in. It's a program, right? Someone wrote a program that automatically identifies these videos.
And it has false flags. It'll flag it flags all videos about the topic, not just ones that are. They might flag.
It flags it, and it also algorithmically demotes it too. Like again, it won't even shadow ban it. Like, come on, that is a.
Well, that's not
if your point is that YouTube is a giant organization that acts for its own purposes in ways that are not entirely transparent. Yes.
Oh, believe me, I have problems with that all the time, right? Look,
we're on the same page.
I have my beefs with YouTube. Like, recently, they issued me a community guideline strike for just no reason at all, and then when I appealed it, they denied it, and I had to harass them on Twitter for almost a week in order to get it reversed. Right? They routinely demonetize every single one of my live streams, and then I appeal it only for virtually every one of them to get the monetization back, because there was actually nothing to demonetize. Right? I have plenty of problems with YouTube. You're not going to get me to say that YouTube is just a perfect paragon of awesomeness. But the fact is that the reason they're doing this is because they, along with virtually everyone else, one, know that the Earth isn't flat, and know that flat Earth is a fundamentally anti-intellectual, anti-science, and retrogressive force in humanity. I know you don't agree. I'm not asking you to. But that is the conclusion that virtually everyone is going to come to. And it is on the flat earthers to provide the evidence, but they haven't. In fact, that kind of ties into a question that we have from Icarus, which is, do you, Michael, know about 15 per hour drift, Bob?
That was like when they did the laser measurement system, and it came up like they did 15, found 15 degrees.
A gyroscope measures
laser gyroscope. Yeah.
So gyroscopes, whether mechanical or laser, measure relative motion as compared to basically the distant background stars of the universe, is the way that you would think about it in the
Amakia, nice video.
Yeah, in the actually in any context really, because it also happened for him. So what that means is, if the Earth is not moving, then there should not be any drift on a very sensitive gyroscope.
Rotating.
Sorry, yeah. I meant to say, I'm sorry. Look, I do not speak perfectly all the time. I make mistakes all the time.
It's fine.
But if it is, then what you will expect is that there will be 15 degrees per hour drift, because the way that we define degrees is as part of a circle, and we define a day as, well, a sidereal day, as one revolution of the Earth, right? So you just do the math real quick, and you see that it's 15 degrees per hour, slightly adjusted because it's sidereal versus solar day, but those are only different by a few minutes, so we don't have to worry about it too much. And it will be on 3 axes, anywhere except either along the equator or on either pole, in which case it will be on only one axis. And what Bob Nodell found was that he was getting a 15 degree per hour drift across, when you sum it up, across the 3 different axes that it was detecting rotation on. So then he tried to isolate it from the alleged heavenly energies by encasing it in a bismuth tube, which apparently blocks out heavenly energies. I don't know what heavenly energies are or why bismuth blocks it, but I guess Bob Nodell knows. And it still picked up a 15 degree per hour drift. So he and a group of other flat earthers paid a significant sum of money to have another person who was a flat earther and an engineer come up with a high precision mechanical gyroscope, because they thought maybe it was something funny with the lasers. And the mechanical gyroscope also measured the same 15 degree per hour drift, which means...
I wasn't aware of that.
Oh yeah, it was a whole thing. They actually tried to sue the person who built the gyroscope because they alleged that he was basically trying to cheat them and was like a fake flat earther. They didn't manage to actually get any money out of him, as far as I know. But yeah, it was a whole big long thing that went way after that documentary.
Yeah, I've seen it. Again, there's. I'm just going to invoke. There are plenty of videos that actually can explain it better than I can. Again, I don't have all the answers for this one either. Like this one is good, but again, it just is like, how simple would it be to just trust NASA and just look at their photos and be like, yes, it's a sphere.
I mean, it would be very simple because they have actual optical photos taken on film, developed in a darkroom with a traditional film camera of the entire Earth.
Pretty interesting though. Now you will have, let's segue to this real quick. Okay, so I will admit, ring laser gyroscope, I'm sat here with no good answer. And a lot of these I'd love to come back and do research on and come back and bend the knee or have a response. The circumnav is one that I'm definitely going to look into. Loved our water conversation, and the ring laser gyroscope is really cool. There's tons of other topics I'd like to talk about too, if I ever can have the energy and feel good to. But I wanted to go into this next real quick. Is how can we see so far, like the world record photo?
Well,
for miles.
I want to get into that.
Oh my goodness, some of these are getting insane. And if this is too long, like maybe we can pause this one. But
well, it's actually not that long of an answer, but I do want to get this super chat in. This is from MK Ultra for 30 shekels, who says, my favorite dash, which means, my favorite is, NASA means to deceive in Hebrew. It's utter nonsense. This is NASA in Hebrew, and he puts in how NASA is spelled with his, which a nun and aleph, a samech, two yods, and another aleph. This is the word to deceive, nun, shin, ha, which I think is a ha, or am I just getting too Arabic again? Because I know the Arabic alphabet way better than the Hebrew alphabet, so like I always just assume Arabic names for all the same letters. Sorry about that, all the Hebrew speakers out there. I spent way more time studying Arabic than Hebrew. It's with a shin, not a sin. Oh yeah, sin. Yeah. Hilarious nonsense. Which is, that is true. I mean, but you haven't made that claim, so I'm not going to put that on you. Because as far as I know...
I've seen that one. I mean, but I'm not out here being like, oh, the Hebrews are running NASA and they're getting everybody.
Well, usually the claim is that not so much that the Hebrews are running NASA as that NASA use that as their name for like a cheeky little pun about the fact that they're lying. It's not usual. Although then again...
I've seen it. No comment on that one.
Yeah, fair.
But it is weird. It is weird. When I Google it, it does come up. Like,
yeah, that's because a lot of flat earthers have lied about it. Right?
Google's results have gone down lately, in my opinion.
Actually,
like they just had
that's
one.
A fairly universal observation. They actually have. It's much harder
their
to find
first results for that were garbage. Sorry.
Yeah. So as far as seeing too far, well, the fact is that refraction is a thing, and most of the time, refraction on Earth tends to be downward refraction, which makes things in the distance appear higher, which somewhat counteracts the otherwise straight line path of light that would block things by the horizon. But also we can tell when there is refraction in most cases because things like the image will be distorted. Like there's the famous quote-unquote black swan image, where if that's actually an image without refraction, then someone needs to call those oil rigs because their cranes are about to collapse because they're wavy as hell. Which is because there's heavy amounts of refraction in the quote-unquote black swan image. So, and the other thing is, you'll notice that the most distant photographs tend to be using different wavelengths of light. And that's because refraction affects different wavelengths of light more strongly than others. So for instance, you hear things like, well, with infrared, we can see farther. Well, yeah, infrared is more heavily affected by the types of temperatures that cause refraction. So if you have an infrared camera, the infrared light is more strongly refracted, so it tends to be able to see farther. And also, it's less likely to be interrupted by things like haze. So if it's a hazy day, You also can cut through the haze with the infrared light because the infrared light is less likely to interact with the haze than visible light because of its longer wavelength. Because the longer the wavelength is, the larger something has to be to block it. And the particles in the haze are less likely to block that infrared light. And that's the thing, is when you actually look into the physics behind all of these things, there's actually no contradiction here. But you actually have to do that. And to say that the globe model is failing means that you have to actually accurately report what the globe model predicts in this case. But when you say we see too far, I've never actually seen an instance where that has been demonstrated. Because we only get two things. Either we get places where you have measured the refraction, and the refraction actually lines up perfectly well with what we are actually seeing, or you haven't measured the refraction, in which case I have no idea how far you're supposed to see, because you haven't actually done the analysis. And yeah, look, I get it. It's not an easy analysis to do. If you want to demonstrate that your claim is correct, you're going to have to do it. Or you're going to have to get someone else to do it.
I see it. You know, I do have a long-range camera, and like I'm always astounded that I can see the base of lighthouses. Like,
have you measured the refractive index?
I have not, and so like that brings me back to kind of my first like statement of like, man, I'm surprised that everything in this reality is set up to where it's kind of an illusion in a sense. Because yes, I do see it, and it's, you know, if it's mirages, then man, it's a pretty consistent mirage because I see it all the time. To some extent,
right? Like, you do not interact directly with the universe, right? You interact with the things that encounter your sensory organs that are then interpreted by your brain, and then you have to do your best to puzzle that out. That's why humans have developed tools to measure things more precisely, or just to measure things that humans can't detect at all, right? You don't have any ability to directly detect radio waves. You use tools to detect those. Every time you listen to the radio, you're using a tool to measure radio waves and turn them into sound. And so, to some extent, yeah, you're not getting an unfiltered, raw view of reality. It's filtered through your sensory organs, which are imperfect. It's then filtered through your brain, which also sometimes just plays tricks on you. Like, both of your eyes have a blind spot. You never see it. You have to do special tricks in order to notice that you have a blind spot, because your brain edits out the blind spot so that you're not consciously aware of it.
That's trippy.
You also don't have color vision in your peripheral, but your brain fills in the color it expects to see there, so you don't notice. Right? There's a whole host of things where the human sensory apparatus is not giving you a perfect view of reality, and so that's why we do careful experiments with measurements with instruments designed to be more accurate than the human sensory apparatus. And so, yeah, to some extent, you're right. The universe is kind of set up to trick you because of how your biology works. But that's why we do science, because we can overcome that with measurement. In fact, to a large extent, Dr. Tapiocaweasel's job is to do things and find out measurements and how the universe works in ways that humans could not do unaided, right? Like, if you were just some guy naked in the forest, you couldn't do the measurements that Dr. Tapiocaweasel does as his day job.
No.
And so, yeah, to some extent, yeah, okay, the universe is kind of set up to trick you in one sense. It's not an intentional, malevolent thing, but you have to remember, human senses are there to keep you alive in a situation where, like, you're gathering fruits and hunting gazelle in a place with a bunch of lions, right? Your senses are plenty good enough for gathering fruits and nuts and green leafy vegetables and hunting gazelles and avoiding lions most of the time. Okay. That's all your senses are really equipped for. When it comes to things like careful measurements of angles, taking temperature measurements at different heights with exacting mathematical precision so you can perform algebraic equations on them to figure out refractive indices and things like that, you need to go beyond your senses. Your senses are not going to be sufficient. That is why science almost immediately went beyond human senses, like the minute the scientific method was developed. Humans exhausted human sensory capabilities very quickly into the history of science. And then it was time to do things like make thermometers, make telescopes, make microscopes, make scales. Although scales actually came before science because people liked to weigh things so they could know how much to sell them for. But yeah, like more precise scales. So you could measure things like single peppercorns, right? So you can figure out things like, what's the density of this light material that I have, and do that kind of science. So yeah, don't rely on your senses. They're insufficient.
True. Well said. I do appreciate you for your time. I am going to log off, play some video games, and go to bed.
What are you playing?
I will Call of Duty and maybe some Dota too.
Okay.
League of Legends or something like that. But I gotta again. I appreciate all your knowledge that you have. Very vast, Dr. Tapiocaweasel. I like the name. Very nice to meet you. It was an honor to be invited on here. I have other topics too that are flat Earth that I'd love to have questions in the future. And
shoot me an email.
I have even other topics that are not even flat Earth related that I bet you guys could easily dispel or talk about as well. Like even creation stuff, just history as well. So, but I enjoyed my time.
Okay. Unfortunately, we didn't get to everyone's question. We did get through the super chats, though, so that is always my top priority. If you paid, you get your question asked. Michael, thank you so much. I think Dr. Tapiocaweasel and I are going to stick around for just a little bit, just to have a quick little
Please, make fun of me. Do what you got to do. I appreciate it. I know I'm here for entertainment purposes, but I think I'm going to dive more into.
This channel is infotainment.
Yeah, I hope I provided some infotainment, but know that I stand by what I've said. I think there's evidence to be talked about, and you have given me a lot to look into, and maybe I'll be back with a changed mind. But again, I appreciate it, and great setup. It was pretty cool to come on here. So
all right,
thanks you. Bye everybody.
All right, later. Okay, so Jake Nelson for $5 says first, metal horns for Dr. Tap doing the work that the rest of us don't have the time for. We love you, Vandy. So
I love my job. I love my day job. It's great.
Yeah. All right. So my final thoughts, and I'm not going to try and just be a dick to Michael here. He was a very polite interlocutor. He was pleasant to talk to. Look, I've seen some absolutely vile flat earthers, and this was not my experience with Michael. I can't speak to his entire life, but in terms of his behavior here, seemed like a nice enough guy. So I'm not going to, sit here and insult him. But I think a few of the things that I noticed the most was, one, there were experiments that he could do to test things that he has misconceptions about, but he has never done them. Another big one is his reliance on just watching YouTube videos. And because I've seen plenty of Flat Earth YouTube videos, I happen to know that, they're not citing any sources that are providing you with actual information that backs up any of these claims. They're just making claims.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. And mostly.
Yeah, there's a reason.
Sometimes they have background knowledge that is, accurate and stuff. Well, okay, I actually do have an exception to... There are some people who make claims. There's this guy, Alan, that I know. He's a whole different story. That's the thing.
Fair enough. So another one was that there's the common tendency I find among people who believe things that are very obviously not true to simply come up with conspiracies as an excuse as to why there's no evidence for their claim. And like I was saying, it brings along the problem that now you have to demonstrate not only your claim, because you still have to demonstrate that, right? You still have to give me a reason to accept your claim, but you also have a new claim that you now also have to demonstrate. It doesn't help you to say that there's a conspiracy. Now, if there is a conspiracy you can demonstrate, then sure, feel free. Talk about it, right? That's something that we should be aware of if it's true, right? There's a reason that I mentioned the actual conspiracy surrounding the start of the Spanish-American War. It's because it was a real conspiracy. It actually happened. We should talk about that when we're talking about the Spanish-American War. I don't do that very much, but Spud Biro for $5 says, all this creationism and flat earth anti-vax stuff is also interconnected and seems like a mental illness. So I do want to say that I don't think it's fair to say that it's a mental illness per se. Now, you might find people who are mentally ill in ways that prejudice them towards conspiratorial thinking, right? Like they might have paranoid delusions or something. But on its own, believing in conspiracy theories, I don't think is a mental illness problem primarily. Instead, I think what it is humans like to feel like they have things figured out and like there is some kind of controlling force. And it seems like humans would rather that force be nefarious than simply not exist. And so people tend to imagine crazy conspiracies because it helps explain an otherwise seemingly chaotic world. And even people who are religious and think that, there's a god controlling things, most of them would rather not attribute things like terrorist attacks and lying about the shape of the earth to the direct action of God, because they like to think nice things about God, which is understandable. And so they come up with this other nefarious group that is controlling things, because they would have trouble coming up with a beneficent group that would be controlling things, including things like wars and famine and disease and all these horrible things. And so I think it's that desire that there be some kind of control in the world so that you can understand the world in a way that is systematic, where you can put things in boxes, and at least to your mind, everything has a nice rational explanation, even if it's an unpleasant one, because that's easier for a lot of people than essentially the uncontrolled chaos that the world otherwise seems to be, which I think is, to a large extent, kind of how the world is, right? Sure, there are people pulling strings here and there, but by and large, it's all a whole bunch of nonsense. And that's just what, unfortunately, it is, right? There's a bunch of nonsense. People do stupid things for stupid reasons. People start silly wars for silly reasons like, hey, the companies that donated to my political action group really, really would like a war because they make bombs. So I have an incentive to go bomb things, because it will make the shareholders that pay my campaign fund more money to funnel back into my campaign, so I can get reelected, so I can keep my powerful and usually well-paying political position. Is that a conspiracy? Not really. It's just people having motives that are based on greed, and that's not going anywhere. So yeah, I don't think it's a mental illness problem. The other thing I wanted to point out, though, about the problem that I think Michael has is he has an extreme confirmation bias. So anything that seems like it might even a little bit support his view of the Earth, or even just isn't quite contradictory to it, he will simply accept. But when it comes to things that do not do that, not only is he less likely to accept them, as far as I can tell, he doesn't even check, right? Because
it was. I found it somewhat remarkable, actually, how receptive he sort of seemed when we went through the Google Earth example and traced it out, and we're like, "Yo, this is what you're asking for," and he was like, "Yeah, that I'm gonna have to look at it." Is that actually going to pan out to him, or is there going to be some reason?
Look, like I said, I don't want to,
dunk
on Michael, especially while he's not here to defend himself. I would be surprised if he comes back later on saying, yes, I accept that this was a north to south pole navigation, circumnavigation, and like I said, I am now back believing in a spherical Earth, even if it's a geocentric idea that he has, right? That would at least be less wrong.
Yeah, and you can get real pedantic about that one.
Let's not. But we do have a super chat. MK Ultra for 15 shekels says, your explanation is very precise according to psychology. Also, many of them have narcissistic and grandiose characteristics. I mean, yeah, there is a certain grandiose narcissism to the idea that I'm the one who knows the secret knowledge that explains the universe. But that does not have to rise to the level of pathology, right? You don't have to be pathologically narcissistic. You just have to be kind of full of yourself. Now, that's not to say that narcissists won't end up in conspiracy things, because like I said, there are certain mental disorders that will predispose you towards conspiratorial thinking, and narcissism may be one of those because you think that you have the secret hidden knowledge. So yeah, that is a thing, but yeah, it's not overall just a result of mental illness. And that's one of the things is, it is not the case that incorrect beliefs that are firmly held are in and of themselves a sign of mental illness. That is not how mental illness works, right? There are plenty of normal, otherwise healthy thought patterns that just simply happen to not be terribly useful in the real world that are just normal to humans, right? Because human cognition was not designed to come to absolute true conclusions about the universe. Just like with the senses, it was designed to navigate both a world full of dangers and in which you need to find food to survive, as well as the complexities of the social hierarchy you're in. And one of the things about navigating a social hierarchy is sometimes it's more useful to believe something that is incorrect if it's helpful in your standing in the hierarchy than it is to just be right. And if you find yourself where your community is a bunch of flat earthers, and that's someplace where you found a connection, where you found a sense of belonging, it becomes extremely difficult to extricate yourself from that because it means rejecting that community. And that's a normal response that humans have. That's not a pathological thing. You might not like it, just like I don't particularly like the way that the human coccyx is arranged because it's prone to injury. That's extremely painful. But that doesn't mean that having a coccyx is pathological. That's just how humans are. So yeah, I really want to make sure that we don't blame this on mental illness. For one thing, it's inaccurate. And for another thing, it's just furthering the stigmatization of mental illness, right? Which is not helpful to the mentally ill. Virtually everyone has some kind of mental problem out there. And stigmatizing that it does two things. One, it makes it harder for them to interact in the world if people find out about their problem. And two, it makes it harder for them to go and seek help because there's a stigma attached to it. So my goal is let's destigmatize mental illness and not blame incorrect beliefs simply on it. PhD Tony, which I believe this is his first time on the channel, for $10 redo says, all flat earthers need is any pair of points on Earth's surface for which the spherical distance formula fails to produce a good estimate of the surface separation. Yeah, that is great. I mean, and that's sort of the more precise version of the do you have a flat Earth map that is useful question, right? Can you find any 2 points in which you use a flat Earth assumption and find the accurate distance between them such that when we actually measure it, now it's going to have
you
to be
need three.
Well, no,
you need 3 points. No, 2 points will work.
No, to get the shape, that's true. You would need 3 points to determine the shape. But just to figure out if your map is wrong, all you need is 2 points, right? Because
I mean, you could rescale it. You could just say that you could make the scale whatever it needs to be to work for 2 points.
Well, yes, but then you would have to use a different flat Earth model for every 2 points that you use. If you just say a flat Earth model,
which is yes.
For instance, like if we look at my little flat Earth thing here, which is the opposite of the typical flat Earth model, right? But if I wanted to go from like Morocco to Addis Ababa
where's Addis Ababa?
It's the capital of Ethiopia.
Okay.
Right? Now, that part is significantly above the equator, which means it's some of the most distorted places on my map. There is no formula based on this map that would accurately predict that distance, but also predict the distance between, say, like Sydney and Melbourne, or Melbourne. Yeah. Right. So
not without being mathematically equivalent to reversing the projection that you've got and actually just being on a globe.
And that's one of the things is like it's actually trivially easy to demonstrate that the Earth is flat if the Earth is flat. It's not a hard thing to do if it's true.
Yeah, those angles. The angles of that shape on that of the navigation, the interior angles have to, or the exterior angles have to sum to like 360 or something. There's a very specific relationship for like.
So for triangles,
any enclosed polygon.
For triangles,
interior angle is 180. But exterior angle I think is always 360.
That actually sounds right because you always have to come back around on yourself. But the generic formula for the internal angles of a polygon are always it's going to be n-2 times 180 degrees, and where n is the number of sides on the polygon. Yeah, and that's in Euclidean space, right? But if you have positive curvature, then the internal angles will always be greater than n-2 times 180 degrees. And if you have negative curvature, then the interior angles are always going to be less than n-2 times 180 degrees. So you can actually generalize this to any polygon, right? Like you can say, what if it's a quadrilateral, or what if it's an octagon, or a septagon, or whatever.
Exactly.
Boneworm for $5 says, no part of our poor ape brains evolved to grapple with the concept of virtual particles. Yeah, that's very true. And also, that's their third super chat on the live stream. Thank you very much, Boneworm. I think that means that all of your super chats so far have been on my live stream. I really do appreciate that. So yeah, one of the things that frustrates me is the triviality that it would be to demonstrate the flat Earth, and the fact that flat earthers just don't do it. And I get it. Part of it is because I think somewhere they know that if they did, it wouldn't work, and there's no point to trying. I think also part of it is just a defeatist attitude because they think that there are so many things arrayed against them, even though in reality,
yes,
no one who's powerful enough to be arrayed against them in a meaningful way gives a single care about flat Earth. They just don't.
Yes.
Right? I do this on YouTube because, I fight pseudoscience. It's usually young Earth creationism, but hey, I do other stuff too. This is an example.
I do this for fun.
Yeah.
I find the whole thing fascinating.
Yeah. And so, but I could not be arrayed against flat Earth in a meaningful way, right? I could, if a flat earther wanted to do an experiment that would demonstrate the Earth is flat, I could not do a single thing about it unless they wanted to do it, in my living room or something, right? The amount of power that I have over flat earthers to prevent them from demonstrating the truth of the flat Earth is essentially nil. And that's true for basically everyone who actively opposes flat Earth, on any kind of regular basis. If you look at Craig from FTFE, or Simon Dan, or Creaky Blinder, or PhD Tony, or any of these people, right? PhD Tony, if you wanted to stop a flat earther from calculating the distance between points, what would you do? You couldn't, right? Were you going to fly to their house and punch them in the face or something? No, you couldn't. You wouldn't even know where to go. And the same thing for Simon Dan or FTFE, right? They can't do it. There's nothing that anyone who cares enough about flat Earth to counter it could possibly do to prevent these experiments, which means that the lack of these experiments is a self-imposed problem. It's a problem flat earthers give to themselves. I almost said young earthers because it's what I always say on this channel. Although, to be fair, a lot of flat earthers are also young earthers.
Almost all flat earthers are young earthers. The reverse is not true.
Yeah, most young earthers are not flat earthers.
Yes.
Actually,
by a vest.
Danny Faulkner is a young Earth creationist who I believe is associated with AIG, and he's written a book all about how silly flat Earth is. And unlike Kent Hovind, he can actually give good reasons why the Earth isn't flat. His book actually is full of actual evidence that the Earth is round, because that's one of the things he believes about science that's actually true, unlike almost everything else he believes about science. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
See, PhD Tony says in the chat, yes, nothing I could do. Yeah, exactly, right? We don't have this kind of immense power that these flat earthers think we have. And quite frankly, anyone who does just doesn't give a crap, right? It's the same thing, why isn't there a 24-hour feed from the moon or from the ISS or from where? Because no one cares.
Also, there is, for the record, there is a 24-hour feed from some of those places.
Yeah, actually, the Himawari satellite is one of my favorites, right? Because it gives, every 10 minutes, there's a photograph, and if you're in any of the places imaged, you can check the cloud patterns against what you can see in the sky, and they're going to match. Which I can tell you, as someone who does CGI on a semi-professional level, there is no way you could do that. It's not possible.
That level of production, you could do it. You could do it maybe for one time 1 week, each week. Maybe you could do it.
I think you could do it daily.
But okay, maybe you could do it daily. You can't do it every 10 minutes. You can't do it constantly. You just can't do it. It's
just the math.
There's too much data to gather.
Yeah, just the math to get the clouds to look right every 10 minutes would be enough to break most machines that are made to render.
And you have to know what the clouds are supposed to look like, which means you'd have to gather data from all over the planet.
Yep, in real time every 10 minutes. It's just not possible. The data gathering isn't possible. The computational power that it would require is... maybe if you had access to some of the most expensive supercomputers, you could do it. But then you're doing that to trick people into thinking that the Earth is a globe with one weather satellite from Japan? I guess. Seems like a waste of resources to me. But then again, I guess flat earthers think all space exploration is a waste of resources. So what do I know?
Yeah.
But I do think it's getting time to wrap this up. We've been going for a bit over 2 hours at this point, which is longer than I expected to go, honestly. I had fun. I hope you had fun. I think Michael had fun.
I had a great time.
I am perfect, Michael. If you rewatch this section, I am perfectly open to you emailing me again and having another conversation. Maybe we can actually get Jackson Wheat on. He wasn't here because his internet isn't available because he moved and couldn't get internet set up in time. So
terrible.
Well, it happens.
I was just going to say that I would also potentially be interested in having Michael come on Maya's channel, and it wouldn't be our normal Bad Science Sunday thing, but because that's kind of confrontational of a name to come under. But Maya probably won't let me because she doesn't let me do flat Earth on Bad Science Sunday.
Jake Nelson for $5 says, "Whose word do I take? I can't explain my position," or PhD physicist. Yeah, Vandy wins. No, which is fair, right?
I am mighty.
And look, here's the thing, right? It's fine to not know.
Yeah,
things,
there's
right?
a lot of things I don't know.
But if you're then going to confidently make a claim that is contradicted by the actual explanations to all these things, it behooves you to find out about all of those things, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, look, there's a lot of things that I quote unquote know, but I can't explain all of them, and it's one I don't talk about them a lot, right? I know things about cars. I don't actually have great reasons to believe any of those things, and I don't know a lot about cars, so I don't talk about cars, right? But yeah, we're gonna get out of here. Let's Dr. Tapiocaweasel, we have your link for your Bad Science Sundays in the description. That is something you do with Maya Atkinson, who is also a great friend of the channel. She's one of my longest term supporters. She's been a mod on this channel almost since the very beginning of it. So, huge shout out to Maya Atkinson. She has been a huge part of this community since, like I said, basically since it started. So what's your schedule for that? It's obviously Sundays, but what time?
Yeah, it is. It is Sundays at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific.
And that's PM.
So, and it's PM, yes.
Okay.
And it's 2 hours. And the basic format is that we have a guest on each week, and this week we'll have Kip Davis, actually.
Oh, nice. He's been on this channel.
Yeah, so yes, he has. And we're gonna try and find some cool. It's a little bit. I'm like a physics guy, so there may not be a ton of overlap, but we've already found some pretty wacky things that people believe about the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh goodness,
and,
yes.
Yeah, and that's his jam. So yeah, so we're probably gonna go some of that route. It's gonna be great.
Awesome. That does sound cool. Which also, I don't think Kip told me about that, and I'm in a DM with him, so I'm going to have to go and say, hey, how come you didn't tell me about this? So let's talk about what's coming up on the channel. So if you're watching this in the future, sorry, this is all past. So tomorrow on the 11th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, Doug's Amazing Fabrication, the movie. That's going to be a 2.5-hour supercut of all the parts of Doug's Amazing Fabrications. So if you liked my series about Doug Batchelor, and you want to watch it all without having to click through to different videos, that is going to be available starting tomorrow. There will be nothing on Friday, but on Saturday, myself and Vishanti are going to be taking a look at a relatively new to the scene young Earth creationist named Graham Patterson, whose channel is mostly just generic Christian preaching, but he occasionally has a few anti-evolution videos. So we're going to take a look at two of them. The first one is about the Cambrian explosion, and then the second one is about whether or not macroevolution has been observed in fruit flies, because someone sent him a paper about that. I have edited them slightly for time. There's a few instances where he goes on a little about oh, well, I believe the Bible or whatnot. It's like, yeah, you're a young Earth creationist. We know that. I don't need to hear it. We're going to skip past that. But like I said, it's lightly edited. It might go a little bit over the 2-hour mark because we have about 24 minutes worth of stuff, which isn't enough for 2 episodes. And Vishanti and I usually get it through like 20 minutes worth of original content from the person we're responding to in a 2-hour.
Do you get through that? Do you get through that much?
Yeah, usually it's about 20 minutes over the course of 2
Okay,
hours. Yeah. So it's about 5/6 original Dapper Dinosaur and Vishanti content, and about 1/6 crazy nonsense person content.
Yeah.
So with that though, thank you very much. I hope to see all of you tomorrow for the premiere. I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna finish up this margarita that I opened up when it got a little bit too yeah, you guys might have noticed that I opened up a drink counter. That was to count the drinks that I when I started in on this margarita, which I had staged in case it got too silly, and it did get too silly. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the week, and stay safe. Later. Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Ben Tovend, Phil Ravara, Tapiocaweasel, Whispers, Denny5252, Eleron Teller, Horseflesh, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostock Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, Monkey They Them, Robert Carpenter, Sphincter of Doom, Vollus, Strawberry Vein, and Ita V. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.